Welcome to the Georgian Dream podcast. Today we speak about the legacy of the Saakashvili's regime in the dimension of human rights. My guest today is Vice Chairman of the Parliament of Georgia, Archil Talakvadze. Today when I was preparing and thinking about our podcast, I found it actually quite hard to decide where to begin, because the legacy of Saakashvili in the domain of human rights is very big. Almost every sphere of this domain was significantly damaged during his ruling. He himself, Saakashvili, named and characterized the system he has built at the best. He said, zero tolerance. Let us try to speak what it means, zero tolerance, in respect of human rights.
Tamar, let me first of all thank you for inviting me to your podcast. When we speak about Saakashvili and his rule, Saakashvili looks like a pagan idol from now looking backwards. And as all pagan idols, he actually required a lot of sacrifice in face of ordinary citizens. And I think that the legacy and the simple name of his rule was compromising human rights in name of democratic reforms. Many people used to look for the justice for a number of years. Many people died actually not finding the justice. Zero tolerance will depict actually the philosophy, if this isn't philosophy, of compromising human rights in name of democratic reforms.
When we speak about the grave violations of the human rights, first of all, we think about the prisons and the penitentiary system under Saakashvili's regime. Also, we need to bear in mind that actually Georgia scored leadership in the raids of people in jailed. Let us speak about it.
Right. This is a very important page of the entire story. When I used to work as an advisor to the Ombudsman of Georgia, actually Ombudsman was one of the strongest institutions which stood against the human rights violations and the harsh policy Saakashvili's administration implemented in Georgia. And I had full overview over the human rights violations used to happen in different domains, including in the institutions where deprivation of liberty happened. And I can tell you that Georgia's penitentiary system, as after I used to work, after the shift of the government, I used to work as a Vice Minister of Corrections in Georgia, and I was responsible for the penitentiary healthcare. But it was a system full of people who've been tortured, who've been treated in human way, and whose health conditions were so damaged that during first 2 years we used just to invest all our resources in the healthcare to pay adequate attention to the prisoners. The problem before we took a management of the correction system was the highest rate of mortality among the prisoners, and that was in nominal numbers more than 140 in a year for the 20,000 prison population. And we have one of the highest TB indicator in the penitentiary system, about 1,000 new cases in a year. And where we made actually the universal testing for the hepatitis C infection in the penitentiary system, I remember that more than half of the prison population had been infected with the hepatitis C virus. Of course, biggest problem was the limited access to the adequate healthcare services, and therefore a lot of people in the prison, a lot of inmates used to die because of the limited access to the healthcare service. And in addition to that, very scaring part of the health story of the prisoners was that many of them had health damage and traumas received through inhuman treatment and torture practices Saakashvili's administration had implemented in the penitentiary system. As the facts actually speak, it was a systemic approach to somehow intimidate prisoners, to make them silent, and to show them the double punishment, so-called double punishment. Saakashvili's rule was so much characterized. This was a cornerstone and the standing point of the Saakashvili's administration because of the prisons were so scaring. Prisons were full of grey stories and inhuman treatment, torture, and death of the inmates. Whole society was so much scared of this penitentiary system and of this judiciary system, which used to send hundreds, thousands of people to that correction system. The very good example of how penitentiary and correction system used to scare and intimidate the entire society was that lots of businessmen that time used to go to the prosecutor's office, used to go to the notary offices in midnight and present their properties to the state, which is absolutely unbelievable. In none of the democratic states in Europe, businessmen and property owners go to the state-owned offices and present their wealth to the state free of charge. And that's why Saakashvili's current political moves seems to me very false, very facade, and very unjust, to tell you honestly.
Now you spoke about the systemic approach of Saakashvili regime in the penitentiary. Right. Very interesting is the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights in the case of Girguliani murder.
Yes.
In that decision, we see that the court was actually struck how different branches of the state power acted in concert to prevent the rule of law to be served. This is one of the most important findings of the decision of the European Court on Girguliani case. This systemic approach was very harshly felt in the society. Indeed, the society was driven to oppose the inhuman treatment. But these manifestations were raided, as well as free media was raided. And we have examples and cases, very many cases, but among these cases, case of one of the leading free media, Imedi, is striking. It happened during manifestations on 7th of November. In combination, the raid of Imedi and the raid of the manifestation, this was a message to the public to stay silent.
Actually, Girguliani's case was one of the most alarming cases we've ever seen in the modern history of the country. And it was absolutely demonstrating and putting Saakashvili's rule and their principles in a nutshell. I think that the decision and judgment the European Court of Human Rights made for Girguliani case was a precedent judgment because the articulation in the text of the judgment clearly said that judiciary system, law enforcement system, state administration was under full vertical control of the President Saakashvili, and it acted like to implement the instruction of one person who was against innocent citizen in this case. This was the first time when European Court of Human Rights made such indication in the judgment, and was a formal assessment of Saakashvili's rule on the level of European Court of Human Rights. Though again, as a former human rights defender, I can tell you that there have been many precedent cases before, and these cases are well known to our societies, especially civil society activists and the human rights defenders. So putting Saakashvili's rule and their logic of functioning in a nutshell in the light, saying that president was controlling all parts of the government and there was no democratic institutions which could guarantee rights of the citizen, which could challenge, and where actually family members of Girguliani could challenge the government. It simply did not exist, and that was said in the judgment of European Court of Human Rights about Girguliani case.
Indeed, so many cases during Saakashvili's regime that are even beyond human imagination. Brutality of these cases beyond imagination in the 21st century. Now I want to have a look at the controversy that we are presented right now. We heard Saakashvili saying that he doesn't know and he doesn't remember, for instance, Megis Kardava, one of the unfortunately notoriously well-known statesperson who gravely abused his powers, and the recordings of the torture of people found in the region of Georgia and Samegrelo are linked to his case. So Saakashvili, in the cases we're talking about, the cases of torture, of murder, of brutally beating up people, abducting people, and seizure of property, and different forms of abuse of power, Saakashvili forgets his involvement and his major contribution to any of these cases. But on the other hand, he declares himself to be the person who has built the state, who has built the state system, and who was in the total power of the state. So on the one hand, he links all the reforms and architectural buildings and some roads and bridges to his statehood. But on the other hand, the domain of human rights, he detaches himself from that domain. So this is the controversy, and right now, as he faces the justice, we can very loudly hear this controversy.
I would say that Georgia had huge support from its civil society and from the partners of outside. So as soon as the changes had happened, of course, the power to change things for better was considerable, and power was driving Georgia to the better future. And I think that achievements Georgia made last period and achievements Georgia made during the times we discuss, first of all, is a result of consolidation of Georgian citizens and partners of Georgia investing for the progress of the country. And I can tell you that Saakashvili managed to create an imaginary democracy where impunity and punishment, illegal punishment, lived together. And the cases you describe now demonstrate again that impunity and punishment for the selected people who were unacceptable for Saakashvili's rule happened in the same time, same space, and same reality. And of course, Kardava's case, Kardava's personality, who is actually a symbol of an official who used to work backed by Saakashvili's entire administration, because in every region there had been other Kardavas working in the same manner. And Kardava is actually the symbol and demonstration, illustration how people had been punished illegally out of the legal system, out of the legal framework, in the forests, in the cellars. They've been abducted, they've been tortured, they've been raped. Unfortunately, these cases came out in the light and was shocking for the entire society. Georgian citizens will never ever vote for the leaders who've been in charge of this. And that's why today what we see in the real democracy Georgia has now, with the plural media, with the balanced system of administration, where branches of government operate and balance each other, where Georgia actually had guaranteed and protected property rights of its citizens, and critical opinion is accepted, and media, as I said, is diversified, even though a lot of disinformation is generated every day. In this very reality, we see that Georgia overcome the times of Saakashvili, and our government clearly delivered this and clearly proved that ruling of this country is possible in respect of human rights, is possible having a pluralistic media, is possible of having many independent political parties in the parliament, and ruling of this country is possible without the grave violations Saakashvili had.
You know, when I see free manifestations and when I see prisoners treated with honor and dignity, I am proud. Because otherwise, if I saw that manifestations not held, manifestations not free, media silent, opposition silent, and prisoner not treated with honor and dignity, I would have said that what Georgian Dream has brought with its ruling was in vain. But no, prisoners should be treated with dignity, manifestations should be loud, and opposition should be loud as well. Thank you very much, Archil. Thank you for watching. Until the next time.